Welcome to elenasbarre low impact full body workouts. On this channel you find different format workouts that will help you to tone up your muscles, improve your posture, gain overall strength, endurance, balance and flexibility. Check more classes on elenasbarre Patreon. Join us for my crazy piano practice on Sundays. We also talk about controversial topics that can trigger you. You participate in our conversations voluntarily at your own risk. Read the disclaimer in the description box. If you don't want to be mentally or physically challenged, I suggest that you skip this video. Thank you so much for your understanding. Hello, my dear friends. Welcome back to elenasbarre low impact full body workouts. I have a few special guests today with me.
Hold on.
See?
I think I got double things going on here.
Okay. That's so funny. Are you ready?
You can tell it's live.
Okay, hold on. Okay, now I got it fixed.
Oh, good. Okay, guys, today we are going to talk about conspiracy theories. We all love conspiracy theories, right? Well, some of us do, some of us not so much, right? So we will talk about conspiracy theories and propaganda. And I have a few special guests with me. We have Steve Sandman, and he makes videos with Glenn Lawrence. And I also wrote an article based on the conversation that he had with Glenn. And I'm still working on that other one. I'm still collecting more data. And I usually like to summarize a few topics, in my articles. So it's not just like one topic. So yeah, I'm working on it. Then we have Eamma, our usual star here. So she's a fitness instructor. She's a Kundalini teacher. She's a yoga teacher. And then we have my husband here, Plutarch.
Hello.
Hi, dear. So yeah, let's begin. I heard a comment here before we started. Let's see here. Amazing how the conspiracy theories come true.
I was having that exact conversation earlier, actually.
Wow. What do you think about this?
Well, I think a lot of conspiracy theories come true partially.
Okay.
And then they take that as a win. They say, see, I was right. Well, you were kind of right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, where do the conspiracy theories come from? Does anybody know? Like, why? What's behind them?
Well, they come from a lack of information. We were actually talking about the lack of information of a certain airplane that went down 10 years ago, and no one knows where it is.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We don't know, and so all we're left to do is speculate. That's all we can do. And so, of course, we're going to speculate, and then people are going to group around different interpretations and versions of that speculation. The answer is, as we're never going to know on this particular incident. So the conspiracy theories will never be proven right or wrong. That's just the way it is.
Although you say that, I mean, they think they found another plane crash, haven't they, recently? And I mean, that one was from the 30s. Amelia Earhart.
Oh, goodness, yes.
So you never know whether, something might come out one day.
And they've been thinking they found her plane for ages, and eventually maybe we will. We are continuing to map.
Has it not been confirmed yet?
No.
Okay, I apologize then. I thought that had been.
Well, they've been thinking they found that plane, but the ocean is a very big place.
Yes.
I think we can all agree on that. The ocean's a very big place.
And it's kind of deep in some places, too.
A little bit, yes.
Don't we know more about space than our own oceans? Or we've explored more of space than our oceans.
Yes, that's sadly true in some senses. Because it's a lot easier to put a telescope and just point it up at any random point in the sky and say, see, I found something.
Right.
Okay, that brings up an interesting conspiracy theory. Did we go to the moon?
Oh.
So, I mean, here's the argument.
Yeah.
Well, you got that Van Allen belt up there, and a lot of radiation, and supposedly, Soviets sent up some, I don't know, a chimp or people up there, and they came back fried. But we went to the moon successfully. But right now, we don't quite know how we would get through the Van Allen belt with the high levels of radiation. So, was it real or was it not real? And has anybody ever sent a spaceship up to the moon to encircle it and actually take some high resolution images of the landing sites? No. So, hey, lack of information. We don't know.
Well, okay, but this is where how much you know matters. So, does anyone know that there is a light reflector on the moon?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So
Yes.
during one of the Apollo missions, one of the things that they were trying to do is they were trying to measure the distance between the Earth and the moon. And so they set up this very sensitive light reflector up on the moon. And the reason they can get away with this is because there is no wind on the moon. So so you say, oh, well, most people say, oh, well, dust would cover the reflector and you can't use it. No, they still send light pulses to the moon fairly regularly. They actually use it to calibrate telescopes. So what they do is they send a laser beam out of a telescope. They hit it off a known point in the moon, and they can measure how many photons come back, and then they calibrate their telescopes with it. I watched it being done, and you can actually see the light wave peak when it comes back. It comes back in a specified amount of time. So you can see the whole thing. So there is a man-made object that is specifically built for reflecting light on the moon. And we have video evidence of that object being dropped on the moon by one of the Apollo missions. I forget exactly which one. I think it's like 16, 15. It was either 15 or 16. So this is why this is one of the problems with conspiracy theories, is that if you don't know this little bit of information, then the conspiracy theory sounds plausible. But if you do, you're sitting here laughing at the conspiracy theorist. And people come out and they say, oh, well, here's the evidence. And then one or two people will go, okay, you're right. I shot a laser at the moon. I saw, I had my detector. It came back. I saw the result. Okay. But it doesn't get out to the wider world because the conspiracy theory is more fun. It is more believable that we never went to the moon. Because going to the moon's a big deal. It's hard.
There's all the photographic evidence as well, though, with the crosshairs behind objects, and you saying about the dust displacement. Isn't there a photo of the feet? And supposedly when that landed, dust should have displaced and landed on the foot plates, but it doesn't. So
no, because dust. So that curl of dust that comes up is an airborne phenomenon. There's no air on the moon.
I want to believe that we've been to the moon, but there's loads about the moon. The moon is a really
right. So when dust in a non-air environment comes up, so the landing feet were bowl shaped. They're shaped like bowls, inverted bowls, and they landed on the bottom of the bowl. In that, what you're going to get is dust that goes out and away.
Right.
Okay. Because you need that convection, you need that air environment to curl over.
Yeah, it's not going to swirl.
Yes, yeah, exactly. It's not going to swirl.
Yeah,
so,
I'm just saying what's out there, if you know what I mean. It's not I believe that. It's
no. I know, and I'm happy to sit here and debunk all this stuff. Another favorite one is, why is the background black? Why are there no stars?
Yeah.
Well, that's because if you know how cameras take pictures, then it's actually very easy to explain. It's actually very bright on the moon in the daytime because that's direct sunlight with no atmospheric interference. It's very bright. And so the camera is adjusting its lenses to put the primary light source in focus. But that cuts out all of the weak light of stars. So it just looks black. The stars are still there, don't worry.
That's the aperture of the camera.
Yes. See, I don't know cameras well enough. Yeah, exactly. So again, we and my purpose is not to sit here and break down individual conspiracy theories, although we can, but you can see how if you spend enough time studying, you can come up with the sort of expert answer. For example, I'm a pilot, and there's this famous conspiracy theory about the contrails left behind jet engines, the chemtrail conspiracy theory. It's a load of bullshit. It's bunk. There's nothing there. And how do I know that? Because I am trained to sit inside 737 flight decks and know what every switch does up there. Okay? There's no switch to turn on the chemtrails. And there has to be, I have to have the ability by law to turn off any system in that airplane in case it catches fire. The electrical fires are a massive problem for airplanes. And by law, I have to have the ability to turn it off any electrical system, including pumps that would be used to pump whatever the chemtrail fluid is into the engine.
I'm not one of these that believes the chemtrail thing, but I'm going to speak like a conspiracy theorist.
Okay.
Would they use passenger planes to do the chemtrails? Surely they would use military planes or private planes, or
Well, the conspiracy theory is about the conspiracy theory is about the condensation trail. But you can't tell from the ground whether you're looking at a military plane or a civilian plane without a lot of specialized training, in aircraft identification and at the
radar. Isn't that enough?
Yeah, flight radar is enough actually. But here's the thing you have to know: flight radar is delayed by 5 minutes.
Yeah, not all planes show up on it either.
That's true.
I've quite often looked at one in my area and I'm like, that's not on the map.
So military planes can mask their system, but also there are certain, if you pay enough money, and it's not like a conspiracy, like anybody can do this. You can get a special masking signature where ATC or air traffic control can track your plane, but flight radar can't. And that's done through ICAO. It's International Civil Aeronautics Organization, and it's like $10,000 a year or something like that. But it's a subscription you pay for. And I can point you to the web page where you can sign up for it. Like it's not like it's a hidden thing. It's just people don't know that you can do that. So chemtrails are not a thing. They will never be a thing. And I'm not even going to get into the physics of trying to inject crap into the engine and what that would do to the engine, because it would destroy it. So there's a lot of stuff out there like this, and you have to be an expert to counteract it.
And of course, nowadays there's lots of armchair experts.
Right, there are, sadly, but armchair experts don't cut it, because you're not relying on the experience of, hey, I've sat in a 737 flight deck. I know what these switches do. Okay. You're relying on the experience. Go ahead.
Let's are all conspiracy theories false? Because they're a theory. So if I see something on the news that says, oh, this is what happened, debunking what people are saying, should I believe that? Or can I also say, well, there might be more going on here, and there might be ulterior motives for causing this to happen, but they don't want us to know them. Somebody is doing something for their own benefit, but there's a cover story.
So here's the problem, and everyone's going to hate this answer, because the answer is, we don't know enough to know whether or not the conspiracy theory is true, or there is a cover up, or they are actually legitimately reporting something that happened. Because it goes back to you need expertise and you need knowledge. I've studied flying for years, actually over a decade at this point. Okay. That's expertise, that's knowledge. And so when somebody comes on the news and they say, oh, this thing happened, is there chance that they're giving you, at least if not the truth, or if not a fabrication, then at least a partial truth? Yeah, probably. And a lot of conspiracy theorists would immediately go, aha, see, gotcha. And what I would say is, I live and die by science. And one of my favorite things is Hanlon's razor. And Hanlon's razor states, never attribute to ignorance what can be, or never attribute to malice what can be attributed to ignorance. And journalists are some of the most ignorant people I have ever come across. I do not get any aviation news at all from your normal journalistic outlets. Those people have no idea what they're talking about. None. Okay. Mm-hmm. But because I have the training and expertise in flying, I look at what they say and I go, well, you're just wrong about this. You clearly don't know what you're talking about. But I can't do that for the other things because I'm not an expert.
Hey, you know what? I'm going to agree with you, but I'm going to use a different thing.
Okay.
Dunning-Kruger effect.
Ooh, I love
that. Yeah.
You know what that is?
I know what that is.
Eamma, do you know what that is?
Sorry, I was miles away. Sorry.
The Dunning-Kruger effect.
I've heard of it.
Okay, it basically means the people who know the least are the most certain about their opinion. And the more you know, the more intelligent or knowledgeable you are, the more you say, well, I might be right, I might be wrong, this is my opinion, but I'm not completely certain. So dumber people, to be blunt, I mean, are more certain of their opinions than smarter people. And that's kind of similar to what Plutarch was saying with the journalists.
Well, but tell me where that's the wrong. Yes, tell me where that's wrong.
I don't think it's wrong.
Right.
I mean, I would have said to your question earlier about when is it not a theory? It's a conspiracy theory until it's not. Until it's been proved true.
Right. And then we have to get into the conversation about how do we evaluate whether or not it's true.
Well, information comes out that proves that it's, or proves everyone right.
Sure. So but we just got done dumping on journalists. So if a journalist says it, is it true?
No, because they're usually told what to.
Maybe not.
Yeah,
well, maybe. It's going to depend on because sometimes they tell the truth.
Yeah.
Sometimes they do.
But if a scientist says it, is it true or is it not?
Oh, I love this question. The answer is
science is usually right, but scientists can be wrong.
No.
Well, no.
I would say, let me answer this one first.
Go ahead.
When you advance science, some smart guy comes up with a new theory, a scientific theory. It's not fact yet. They propose theories, and then it stays out there, and then other people look at it and prove it or disprove it, and over time, it can become a fact. But innovations always start out as theories.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what I was going to say. The scientific process is a process of getting closer to the truth with our imperfect methods of measurement. Science itself is not a search for perfection. It is a search for better understanding of the world around us than we had the day before. And that occasionally means that we're going to throw away some stuff that we had learned before. And in other times, we're going to just look and say, that Isaac Newton guy, he was pretty darn good at this. So, okay. And so now, why do we take Isaac Newton as quote unquote fact today? Well, because we haven't found any evidence to prove him wrong. What, 250 years ago or something like that? Yeah. It's a long time. Yeah.
Long time ago.
Yeah. And so science, it more becomes accepted fact without we just can't come up with any reason to say, well, he was actually wrong. So science is not a search for some sort of perfect truth. And I think a lot of people get that wrong. And so, and that can actually be a source of conspiracy theories, is thinking, oh, well, the scientists changed their mind. Yeah, we got new data.
Well, there's still an open debate about climate change or global warming.
Oh,
Is it not? I mean, there still is science arguing back and forth.
Yeah, tell that to the people who say that the science is settled and we should just do what we're told.
Right.
No, I'm on board with you on this one, but I look at this and I go, now, if you want to talk about so people, okay, this is actually a great topic because it allows us to talk about something related to, and people say, oh, well, but the science is settled. Well, is it the science is settled, or is it that all the research has only gone down one path because that path is the only way you can get funding for your research? Yeah. So there is a selection bias that goes on here.
mm-hmm.
And a huge part of conspiracy theories and propaganda is using selection bias to push you down the path that the person wants you to go.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I see it a lot with the climate, global warming people.
Yeah.
They really want to believe that narrative, that just proves that, oh, in a few hundred years, we won't be able to breathe. We will have to do something about it, and it will be too warm.
Well, the climate changes. Do you want to know another cool fact about the climate? It's always been changing since there's been a climate.
Yeah.
What fascinates me is, why did they pick the data from the 70s and they stuck to it as if it's the correct data? Like, how do they back it up even?
Oh, so okay, so she's doing a little bit of inside baseball. This is stuff that I've talked about with her.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So a lot of climate science is pinned to 1970. So basically using 1970 as a baseline. And in science, there's nothing technically wrong with baselining and saying, okay, here's what I'm measuring against. But when it comes to a system as old and as stochastic, I'm going to use a big word there that people hopefully know what means, is that you're dealing with a system that changes in cycles, but it's in cycles that are, like the shortest cycles, like 10,000 years. And so the baseline you pick for really what it comes down to is in the 1970s, we finally got high quality data from satellites and airport. They actually mostly use airport weather stations, which has its own selection bias. But that's why they use it. It's high quality data. It has nothing to do with where we are in the climate cycle. And I'm talking about like a 10,000 year long ice age cycle. Okay. So there's a reason why they did it, but if you don't understand that reason, you're not going to understand anything about what they're doing afterwards. And that matters to the argument a lot, but we just won't talk about why they're using 1970s as a baseline. And then, but the data only covers that they're using 50 years. And so if you're taking a 50-year set of data and trying to apply it to a 10,000 or million year cycle, you're looking at a fraction of a % of that cycle.
And a lot of it depends on how much energy we receive from the sun.
No, you're not allowed to talk about that.
Cycles as well. So
you're not allowed to talk about that.
Is it something that we are doing on Earth, or is it huge external factors? How much sunlight and radiation hits the Earth? And,
well, here's an answer that everybody hates. Here's an answer that everybody hates. Can humans impact their climate? Yes. The question should really be, can humans impact their climate enough to make the changes that we're seeing?
This is exactly how I think. My thoughts on the climate change is, like you said, it goes in cycles. The Earth was habitable. We then had the Ice Age, and we've slowly been warming up since.
Yes.
So why, that's where we're at. We're, just at the highest temperature we've got so far. That's a normal thing. But yes, I do think that man has probably accelerated it a little bit, but not enough to put it all on us.
Produces more CO2, humans or termites?
Isn't it the cows with their 4 stomachs?
No, not cows. No. I think it's the termites, because everything in the rainforest, hey, there's just trillions of termites out there that take the vegetation and convert it back into nutrients or whatever, break it down. Termites. I read this many years ago, so I don't know if it's true or not, but it's plausible. Termites create a lot of carbon dioxide.
Well, but there's an interesting meta point there. There is so much about our ecological system that we don't know, and that is almost impossible to model, like in a mathematical model. So when these climate people come in and they say, oh, well, this model says that humans have this outsized impact on things, they're taking their understanding, and it is an imperfect understanding of humanity's impact on the climate, and adding that in. But they cannot add the impact of, I'm going to say, random events like a volcano. How much greenhouse gas does a volcano emit? It's enormous. And we've had volcanoes since the dawn of Earth. So clearly, like the Earth can handle an enormous dump of greenhouse gases all at once.
Something on the planet, because the planet is designed to cancel out the badness and put out more goodness and keep the natural balance. I didn't explain that very well, but there'll be something out there to counteract what the volcano puts out, if that makes sense.
Let me explain that. Okay, in a greenhouse, lots of times they'll add carbon dioxide to make the plants grow better.
Mm-hmm.
So carbon dioxide is supposedly, or claimed to be, a greenhouse gas that increases temperature. But as CO2 goes up planet-wide, you would think vegetation would do that much better. And so now the vegetation is scrubbing the CO2 and making more oxygen and counterbalancing it. Now, what wins? I don't know. I'm not a climate scientist.
But we're also destroying our habitat, and therefore the vegetation.
Are we?
We are in England.
Well, okay. So one of the big sort of things that we don't talk about much outside of science is the other thing that they put up in the 1980s were satellites that measure just how green the planet is, just how much green. We take pictures. Oh, there's green, there's brown, there's blue, right? Okay. Since they have put the cameras up there, the planet has been getting greener every year.
That's just because they're putting green roofs on. No, I'm joking.
Right. Well, okay. The Sahara Desert's getting smaller. Okay. So if there is more carbon dioxide, and carbon dioxide is plant food, and so we would expect more plants to grow. This is exactly what Steve was saying. So what I've read is that, and you actually saw there was a congressional hearing on this recently. Actually, there is a point in terms of carbon dioxide and what they call parts per million, so ppm. And there's a point where if we get too low, the ecosystem actually collapses, and it's a fast collapse. It's not, like a multi-generational cycle. It's like a few years and it's all gone. Okay. And I think it's like 0.0003 ppm or something like that. There really isn't a whole lot of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, but somebody will correct my exact numbers. And a House representative actually brought this up. And it's like, okay, so we're like 0.003, and then at 0.002, we're in carbon collapse. and 0.004 is closer to the sort of average norm throughout history. So you could make an argument that we've been coming out of a carbon deficit.
Yeah, well, and there's speculation also that when the dinosaurs were alive, some of those were pretty big animals. They ate a lot.
Mhm.
A huge amount of vegetation. So some people speculate that the CO2 level in the atmosphere must have been a lot higher to support the level of vegetation that would have supported animals that large.
Sure. I mean, we have no direct evidence of it today, and
No.
we never will, because we're not living on that earth right now.
Well, they're bringing the mammoth back.
Right.
Well, mammoths haven't been
they were on
that long.
Yeah. They were more of an ice age thing.
Yeah,
So
I'm getting my ages mixed up.
Yeah.
Oh, the mammoths, I think they've been extinct for 2,000-3,000 years.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, that sounds about right. So, but with all of this stuff, if you dig into the science, it's not nearly as simple as the journalists would have you believe. And this goes again to the journalists are mostly just wrong about everything. And to be fair, that's a little bit our fault for asking them to be experts on everything, but hey, you report on this, and because humans want an opinion to go with the data.
Mhm.
They get the data and they want to be told what to do with it. Humans want that. And we can see this when dealing with other topics like the red pill is like, people, they get that observation, but then they want to be told what to do with it. And
Tell me what to think. Don't teach me how to think.
Exactly. No, but yes, people don't want to think for themselves. They want to know what they're supposed to think. And a lot of conspiracy theories operate in that mentality. People, that's what makes the chemtrail conspiracy theory so easy to believe. You see the condensation trail up there. Somebody tells you that that's just a condensation trail, or somebody says, oh, no, that's something being injected into the atmosphere. And you now have a choice between two theories that you can't prove. So you now choose to say, okay, whichever one makes me feel better, or like this is a powerful one. I have insider knowledge that you don't. I know more than you. People love to be told that they know more than the average person because they believe in this conspiracy theory.
Hey, that relates to religion too. Gnostic knowledge.
Yes.
Insider information. Something that I know that no one else knows. I'm special because of that.
Yes. That's exactly what's going on with these conspiracy theories. And it's part of the reason. So, we're also talking about propaganda here. Why does propaganda operate so much in the conspiracy theory space? Because propaganda, one of the primary tools is, I'm going to give you the piece of information that has been withheld from you. And I'm going to teach you the things that they don't want you to know. And famous propaganda, the 1930s mustache brigade, mustache man brigade. He came to people saying, look, there's information that you haven't been told. It's, we are the superior race. Okay. And people love to hear that. And what we don't talk about in the little bit of history, or we don't connect the two, is at the same time that he is doing this whole manifest destiny superior race thing, Germany, the Weimar Republic, and I'm going to use that name specifically because most people will connect the Weimar Republic with a crippling depression and inflation. Yes. Okay. So you now have a situation where people are desperate for anything to hold on to that says that there is some hope for the future. And somebody comes in and they say, yes, there is hope for the future. We are the master race. And go ahead.
He also turned around the economy before he people fully embraced that. He started doing good because
He
I
had
don't
to.
know. I think he went to more of a fiat based currency instead of gold based, but the economy was doing great. They were recovering from that situation
Yes, they were.
between the world wars, and Germany was kind of taken advantage of in the armistice. What is
Oh,
it?
totally.
And they lost a lot of territory. They were having to pay reparations. They never lost World War One. It was an armistice. It was basically, okay, let's quit.
Mhm.
And then it was imposed on them, which created great hardships. And the mustache man kind of led the way out of that economically in the early 30s.
He absolutely did. We don't want to talk about that. We don't want to talk about. He had to do good things in order to be given the power he was given. People weren't just going to hand it to him. He had to prove that he was going to do good things.
Glenn, would you like to join us?
Yeah, come on.
Yeah, let me send you the link again.
So, but he needed a propaganda tool. The first thing he had to do was tell people that, because in order to convince people that there is going to be a future, you have to say, look, here's the future. Here's what he had to convince people that he could turn it around. They gave him the authority to do it, and they believed in him. And so they did turn it around, but he couldn't just turn it around himself. An entire economy does not turn on the will of one man. Lots of people had to come together and say, we are going to turn this around. And he gave them something to believe in. He gave them a story of their own supremacy to believe in. And now there's a whole bunch of financial shenanigans. When you're talking about the Treaty of Versailles, there was some bullshit that went down there.
Big time.
And it's part of the reason that we didn't do that after the end of World War II. We realized that imposing those onerous sanctions wasn't going to work. It would just repeat the cycle. And so we didn't.
I think we're pointing out that Mustache Man didn't just happen. He came out of, there had to be the conditions for his message to come through, and people were desperate. So
yes.
Something doesn't come from nothing. There has to be fertile ground for whatever comes from that. And that's why knowing history and knowing some of these factors is important. Conspiracy theorists often don't know history.
Yes.
They just latch on to something and say, oh, see, here, it proves it.
Yes.
Well, what was the history? What condition? What were people thinking back then?
Exactly. But this goes back to you have to have studied it. You have to understand the history of the situation that led to the Mustache Man. And there was a situation. The Weimar Republic, they were burning currency for heat. That's not a good economic situation. It's just not.
Mm-hmm.
So that clearly goes into the situation. But when we teach history, we say, oh, the Weimar Republic was a thing that happened. Oh, here was this Mustache Man. He came around and said some things and people really liked them. And we kind of treat them as if they're separate events. Wrong. But we don't teach history in a way that we say, oh, well, here's the whole story. And I don't know why we do that. And although a lot of people say, oh, well, it's because they're trying to control and rewrite history. No, I think it's actually much simpler than that. History teachers love to teach history as a series of facts. And I'm not going to say events, but they love to teach it as a series of statements, really. Just this happened,
Mm-hmm.
this happened in order.
Yeah.
And so you don't get the connective tissue. And you don't go into the history of why this people group was experiencing this. You don't get the history of, like what they were choosing to do about it. You don't tie it all together because that's harder to teach. And so the history teachers just read their books. This happened, this happened, this happened, this happened.
Well, there's a whole area of discredited history studies. It's revisionist history.
Mm-hmm.
Those, some of it might be goofy. Others of it is, hey, these people are just going back and looking at events of the time and trying to understand history. And we never understand what happened at the time it happened. It always takes, we always have to look backwards to history to figure out what was going on. And so it's still kind of up for debate, and they're bringing in other factors. And I think it's a healthy thing.
My view is that any debate, even if it's crazy conspiracy theories, can be helpful, if only to turn around and really force an examination of the conspiracy theory to say, look, here is the evidence, and this is like the actual evidence, and here is what was happening, and to the best of our understanding, like we were talking about some of the conspiracy theories earlier about like the moon. Okay, well, if I can shoot a laser at the moon and get the reflectivity back, and I can do an experiment that proves that there is something man-made up there, okay, then we can stop having the discussion about whether or not there's, we went to the moon. But I would much rather have that, just because it allows me to go through the whole process of saying, here's what's up there, here's where it was placed, here's the video evidence of it being placed. Okay. And with that person, and then you can have a full examination of the facts. So bring your conspiracy theories, but when I debunk your conspiracy theory, please don't say, oh, well, that's just your opinion, man. And I think that's really where we've lost the plot these days, is people are like, well, that's just your opinion, or, that's or my personal favorite. So you're telling me they've gotten to you. Oh my God. I can do an experiment that proves you wrong, but the man got to me.
Would those be the men in black?
With the little devices that wipe your memory.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. But we have this problem right now in society where we have so enshrined this idea of sort of like the individual is correct, and we have to treat all individuals as correct. You know what I mean? Like we say, oh, well, but your opinion, your opinion is valid. Like, no, your opinion can be highly invalid. But it's this hyper individualism that we have that really gets in the way of debunking a lot of this stuff, in my opinion.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you say someone's wrong, you might hurt their feelings.
Exactly.
To hurt their feelings. Even if you have facts contrary to their feelings are more important than the facts. So, you know what? You probably should just not bring it up to them and give them a hug. Say, well, yes, you were right to feel that way. And who knows? I think you're right.
Yes, that's what we're told to do. That's what we're supposed to do. That's what the culture wants us to do. And I would say that the pushback is, look at how fractured and disjointed our culture is, but also look at the prevalence of conspiracy theories that are easily debunked. When you walk around telling everyone that their opinion is sacrosanct, that, basically they can become the cult of their own opinion.
Mm-hmm.
You can't have a society that can agree on anything. And if the society can't agree on anything, we can't move science forward. We can't move even basic projects forward. Like, hey, like one of the things that I'm tracking in society is the energy crisis that we're slow walking into. Okay, well, we can't agree how to fix it, because everyone has their opinion, and it ties back to climate change and electric vehicles and all this stuff. But until we can come to some sort of broader cultural understanding of, no, those guys over there, they're the kooks, that what they believe is bullshit, and we're going to go over here and we're going to try and actually solve the problem using what we can at least prove to the best of our ability as humans to be true and correct information, then we can't solve we're not allowed to solve the crisis because, as you said, we might hurt somebody's feelings in the process.
So this over-prioritization of feelings will ruin us.
Yes, it has to.
Yeah, you have a right to your feelings, but you don't have a right to your own facts.
Exactly. the and this whole thing, the conspiracy, the red pill is really run by feminists. Oh boy.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't want to dive into that one. The answer to that is no.
I'd love to dive into that one.
Well, but I mean, the answer to that one is no. But and this is actually a form of propaganda that is presented as a conspiracy theory.
Mm-hmm.
And because the propaganda is the propaganda is trying to kill the red pill, and so we present this conspiracy theory without any evidence that I shouldn't say any evidence, but one of the hallmarks in identifying a conspiracy theory is look for the missing links. Conspiracy theorists is they're going to present their case, and then there's going to be a jump that they make.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to jump over something. They're going to say, well, if you put this all together, and you're going to go, okay, I can kind of see some possible, like not consistency, but like they somewhat correlate. Maybe there's a correlation here. And then they immediately jump to that correlation being a causation.
Well, the most convincing lies are 80% true.
Right. Exactly. And so they're going to come to you with a lot of disjointed truth. And then they're going to say, see, all these different truths, they're connected. And if you ask them how, they're going to go, well, I can't really explain that to you. But clearly, because all these truths kind of coalesce together in a way that I think makes sense, then that correlation must be a cause. It must be true. It must prove it.
Hey, let me bring up something from our last discussion that follows right into this. Pastors say that if couples, a man and a woman, live together prior to marriage, there is a greater chance that they'll get divorced. Now, they call it causation. It causes divorce. What if it's a correlation? And what if, because they were living together, she was on birth control, hormonal contraception a lot of that time, which is really the driving factor. And it's the fact that they were having premarital sex with contraception or not being disciplined enough to not do that. Maybe is that the big factor, or is it because they lived together? What if they don't live together and they were still having lots of sex prior? Correlation, causation. I think they're kind of throwing out a simple answer to something that's more complicated.
I think it's even worse than that, than what you're saying. Because in scientific studies, one of the huge problems that we struggle with, even in hard sciences, is something called selection bias. And the selection refers here to, how do I select what I'm looking at? How do I decide which factors I care about in my study and which factors I don't? So you're bringing up a possible alternative factor, and one that I think is actually probably very important to the discussion. I mean, we know hormonal birth control affects your hormones. Duh, that's the point. Yeah. But we have started to realize that affecting your hormones, shockingly, apparently, affects how you make choices in life. I didn't realize this was some revelation, but according to people outside the red pill, this is a big revelation. Mm-hmm. So shockingly, we have come to the realization that maybe hormonal birth control has an impact on how we choose our mates in life, and that might have something to do with, as she gets off birth control to have kids, and all of a sudden she can't stand the guy she's with, she gets divorced. Oh, you mean there might be an alternative factor that we're not looking at here?
Oh, now feelings come into it. So I feel like it's my right to take birth control, and I don't want to feel guilty for doing that. Therefore, later on, I'm going to attribute whatever problem to something external from me as the cause. Now, and I just illustrated that from pretending to be a woman. Men do it all the time too.
Oh, sure.
It's not me. It's something external. I'm not taking responsibility for what I may have done. I'll come up with some other theory of what caused my hardship.
Yes, we all do that, because taking accountability and responsibility for our actions is a lot more painful than just trying to say, oh, this other thing, person, whatever over here is responsible. But again, that ties back to it. That is what makes propaganda so effective, because propaganda comes in and offers that explanation for why it's really not your own fault.
Mm-hmm.
Bingo.
And so what we see is that throughout history, we get these waves. And so we get this buildup of it starts with something happening. All of the conspiracy theories get crushed. They disappear. Reality asserts itself on the world. You might call this World War II. It was the last kind of big one of these that we had. Because all of a sudden the whole world's falling apart, and you either deal with that problem or you get run over by whoever's causing it, whoever's fighting. So that forces a sort of very real world focused mindset by the entire group of people that's involved. But then you get away from that, and you start to diverge or branch out, and that's where you start to see these, well, your feelings are more important, and then the conspiracy theories start to bloom again. Conspiracy theories were very popular in the 1920s and 30s. Very popular. There's an incredible amount of conspiracy theories going on. But by the 1940s, you don't hear about them anymore. They're all gone. Why? Because the entire collective conscience of the world was forced to focus on the real world. They no longer had the luxury of believing the conspiracy theories, the propaganda, etc.
What's
Okay.
the biggest conspiracy theory that's been going on for hundreds of years? The one we're not going to talk about.
Which one? Because there's a number of them. You might have to get a little more specific here for me. There's a lot of them.
I'll just mention it. The JQ. We're not going there, though.
No, we're not.
But I mean, there's a whole huge thing. People have been.
Well, it's not all conspiracy theories get crushed, but a lot of them do. And so but look at what happened after World War II. During World War II, everyone's super focused on solving the problem of the mustache man and the Dr. Tojo over in Japan. And then we solve it. But you don't immediately go back to just believing whatever. You realize that the fact that you weren't paying attention to the world around you is what led you to the situation that occurred. Like World War II was primarily, like we were talking about the Treaty of Versailles. That was people not understanding that their actions could have these drastic consequences. They were just thinking, no, we have to get our peace back. We have to be compensated for what we were put through. Well, okay, you can do that. But if you don't do a list of other things along with that, you basically have to be an invading empire. You impose your own system on top of the old system. If you don't rebuild the system or put something over it, it just becomes a breeding ground for all sorts of conspiracy theories and propaganda, which is what primarily propaganda, which is what happened between World War I and II. And so that's why after World War II, the United States went in and rebuilt Japan from the ground up in 10 years. We rebuilt Germany from the ground up in 10 years. and they are now our strongest friends in the world.
We didn't start out doing that, though.
No, we didn't start out doing it, but somebody realized that they had tried doing it the other way before because they were still alive, the people who tried it before.
It started out with the Morgenthau Plan, which thankfully was put to rest. And then George Marshall, the general, came in.
Plan. Yep.
The Marshall Plan. That was a good thing.
It was because, well, here's the thing. General Marshall was alive during World War I, and he lived through the intermediate, and he was able to connect all that and realize, hey, look, we already tried that plan. Maybe the words were different, maybe the edges of the plan were different, but we tried that plan basically, and it didn't work. So we're not going to do that. And guess what? He was right. But that's what happens when you're forced into this. I have to look at the world the way it is, and I have to solve this problem, and it can't just be a solution that makes me feel good. It has to be a solution that actually solves the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And the Marshall Plan solved the problem.
So what do you think, Eamma? You have not been saying much.
I'm just listening. I'm just letting you guys chat.
Well, I mean, there's a lot to say about propaganda and conspiracy theories. And I mean, we can talk about individual conspiracy theories for hours.
Yeah.
What I want people to see is that how we're talking about them is how you see through them. There are ways that you can see, oh, really, this person is. That's why I was saying, okay, you get a bunch of correlated truths and you push them together and say, oh, well, this is the conspiracy theory. And then there's a jump that's made to say, usually it's like this person, this cabal, or this, like this. It's usually a cabal. It could be the scientists. It could be the politics, whatever. And and say, oh, well, this cabal is trying to push something. My experience with humans is, I'm a big fan of George Carlin on this one. Think of the person of the most average intelligence and now remember that half of them are dumber than that. Basically, what conspiracy theorists are asking you to do is to believe that the person that they're accusing of running a conspiracy is an idiot savant. They are completely and totally inept in all things except the thing that they want you to believe. And in that thing, these people are these, 200 IQ savant geniuses. And if
you're describing the Russians. Because I know they came in and they influenced the election, and they did it using some Facebook and spending $1,400 or $14,000, and they influenced the election. They were so brilliant that they did it with that little bit, but they were such idiots that they got caught. Yeah, exactly. See, Russians are exactly what you're describing.
Right. You have that. That's actually a great example. Like you're saying, these small little resources and just these little itty bitty bits of movement, and they were wildly successful, but somehow the slugheads at the NSA caught them, or Facebook or whoever they want to say caught them. Okay. Which is it? And this is a problem with a lot of conspiracy theories.
Oh, we got that one with the Ukraine war. Oh, Russia is totally getting their ass kicked, and they're going to lose in Ukraine. But unless we give them more armament, the Ukrainians more argument, Russia is going to invade other countries, Poland and Lithuania. And we got to beat them now because they're so inept that they're losing, but they're so strong that they're going to take over Europe. Which is it?
Well, okay. The answer to this, and I've had to study this topic way more than I want to, is okay. So a lot of people say, oh, well, if Russia invaded NATO, oh no, because you're right. Okay. If Russians invade NATO, it's going to be this. No, it's going to be a 1 to 2 week war. The very first 24 hours is going to involve a massive Tomahawk missile strike where the Allies completely wipe out Russian infrastructure along the border. and then the F-35s go in and start ripping apart everything else. No, they're not going to last long. They're really not going to last long if they invade NATO. And if you understand anything about the technology involved, and you look at how poorly the Russians have done on the battlefield in Ukraine, yes. Now, that said, the Ukrainians really do have a fire problem right now. They are in an ammunition drought. Like, they actually have hardware that they can't put ammo in. Well,
Right.
okay.
Well, Russia has a lot bigger infrastructure backing it up.
It does.
Ukraine. And Ukraine is dependent on the rest of the world to supply them. So, yeah, Russia's like the big muscle guy, and Ukraine is kind of the little scrawny guy, and he's being backed up by others, but eventually Russia will prevail. That doesn't mean Russia's going to want to take on the rest of the world.
Well, the thing to be careful about here is propaganda. So Putin has actually been fairly clear, and they've been fairly clear in their communications that Ukraine is not where they want to stop. I am not saying that they will be successful in an invasion of NATO, but Putin has been absolutely clear in all of his speeches that he wants half of Poland, all of Moldova, part of Romania. And if you go look, those are geographic barriers. So that's the Bessarabian Gap and what they call the Polish Gap. And if you can get to those two places, then he needs a lot smaller military to secure his borders. And the reason he needs that is because Russia is in full-blown demographic collapse. The Russian ethnicity is probably completely dead in 80 years. This is not this is from Russia's own data. And Putin knows this. So
compare that to, well, the South Korean. They're in racial collapse.
They're almost worse than Russia. Those two are in a race.
How does the U.S. compare? I mean, the European culturally Christian population of the U.S., how does that compare to Russia?
Okay, I actually know all this, and Elena will tell you I've been chirping in her ear about this since 2017. Okay. So the United States has what they call, so there's three basic shapes to demographic profiles, and it's how they set up the chart. So the chart is bottom is your babies, top is your dead people, basically. So you know the age goes from low to high, bottom to top, and then you have males on the right, or males on the left, females on the right, or something like that. But you know, and then they do the numbers for each, and they do it in like 5-year blocks. So Russia is what they call a snake trying to swallow a watermelon. It's got this huge bulge because obviously there's not a lot of people who are very old in any culture, but Russia has very few children. Okay. So there's this big bulge in the middle, and as that bulge moves up, it ages out and dies out, and you end up with this just very small demography. So that's Russia, that's South Korea, that's Japan, but here's one that most people don't know. China is worse than all of those.
Yeah, it is.
China, okay, so I said that, you know, Russia has probably 80 years before it hits terminal. China would be lucky to get 30.
Well, they had that one-child policy. Started 30, 40 years ago?
1992.
But did they cancel it? Did they cancel it?
They're allowed 2 now, aren't they?
Yeah, you're allowed 2 now. There's an interesting, and this goes back to propaganda. There's an interesting problem with that. What happened was they canceled it, and people had fewer children. Why? Because the Han ethnicity as a group was convinced that this was a test of their faith and compliance with the one-child policy. It had been so beaten into them that the one-child policy was going to save China that when the government finally comes in and undoes it, they believe that this is a test. The government is testing their fealty and and to the CCP. So they're actually having fewer children now than they have ever had.
Even with the one-child policy intact.
No, it's gone.
Yeah.
Yeah,
well,
but previous.
women have also moved into the workforce in China.
Yeah.
They're working in the factories.
Oh, here's another fun fact about China. This year, they stopped collecting unemployment information for anybody under the age of 25.
Okay.
That's how bad the employment situation is in China. I do not think that the CCP and China, as you know it today, survives to the end of this decade as a unified nation. The evidence is there to suggest that they are already in demographic collapse, and that they have been in demographic collapse since 2010. They're done. Stick a fork in them. The United States, if we really wanted to just kind of push China over the edge, we would station a destroyer flotilla in the Western Indian Ocean, and we'd intercept all the oil ships, and we'd just send them to India. 6 months, the lights go out. 12 months, you have a famine that's going to kill 500 million Chinese. China is hopelessly dependent on the global trade order. They are the most dependent nation in the world on the global trade order.
Mm-hmm.
China does not keep me awake at night.
So how's the U.S. going to fare?
The U.S., and everyone's going to hate this in the U.S., is going to be just fine. So our demographics, they're not perfect. So a perfect demographics looks like a triangle. You've got lots of kids on the bottom, not many kids at the top. We're not that, but we don't have that contraction of babies. We have what they call a chimney profile. It's just straight up and down. We have the same number of babies as we do people.
Kind of like straight, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so the United States, it's not great, but we have Mexico on our border who does have a perfect demographic profile. And so we can work with them, and economically, we share a border. We have NAFTA. One of the best things that Trump did in his entire, I know people are going to be pissed off that I'm saying Trump did something good, but one of the best things he did was USMCA, the USMCA. That was Mexico, China.
Not China, Canada.
Oh, sorry, yeah, Canada. US, Mexico,
America.
Canada.
The one thing also with especially the Mexican immigration to the U.S., Mexicans are Catholic, and that's Christian, and that's culturally similar to the U.S. Not exactly the same.
Yeah.
Possibility, but it's not like as traumatic as trying to merge a Muslim and Christian, culturally Christian European population.
Absolutely.
It's just not as different. And so they'll work out just fine.
They usually do, to the point where, so if somebody comes from Mexico, comes and lives in the United States, their children do not see themselves as Mexican. It's one generation to full assimilation.
If that's fast.
Well, it's because it's so similar. Oh, well, we share similar religious beliefs. We share similar economic beliefs. Like there's so much that we share already. So, now, I personally believe that illegal immigration is bad and we shouldn't allow it. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Like I am big against the whole child sex trafficking thing that's going on down there. But I do believe that legal immigration probably could be a little easier. And I say that having gone through the process with Elena. It cost me a brand new Porsche to do it. And it took years.
Yep, I can relate to that. My ex-wife came here from Canada. We had to jump through a lot of hoops, and it took a lot of time. It was just so unbelievably difficult.
Yes. But that's a compromise that no one wants to talk about right now because it's not politically expedient on either side. So, anyway, we don't need to get too far into those weeds, but Yeah, so the demographic profile of the United States means that we're going to be okay because unlike the rest of the world, our baby boomers had kids. Britain will be broadly okay. They're baby boomers. But again, Britain is so culturally close to the United States that they tended to do the same things that we did. So their boomers had kids. The Brits are going to have to swallow their pride economically, though. That's going to be a fun one.
There was a thing came out this week. In terms of satisfaction, we the only country, below the UK at the moment is Uzbekistan.
Oh boy! Oh boy! Uzbekistan.
Yeah, I think that was what started the conversation the other day with Elena. That our Prime Minister gave a speech. Well, it was a word salad, really, but nothing constructive came out of it. And what I was saying about democracy is slowly dying, and that's what I said. It's how our governments are behaving at the moment is straight out of the cult textbooks. They are drip feeding us, and by the time we realise what they've done to us, it'll be too late because we're all in so deep.
Well, yes and no. So historically, we're reaching a turning point where a lot of stuff. It's been almost 90 years since World War II, and our last sort of cultural turning point. These have occurred every 80 to 90 years, going all the way back to that we can easily identify to the War of the Roses. So we're talking a deep history here on this cycle. But the thing that the Brits are going to have to accept is that after Brexit, and I'm not going to comment on whether Brexit is a good idea or a bad idea. I'm not opening that can of worms. But the only other offer on the table is from the United States, specifically the NAFTA countries, so China, Mexico, US.
Why do you call it China?
Oh, sorry, Canada. It's the C. I just keep seeing the C in MCA. So US, Canada, Mexico. Okay. And that deal involves basically gutting the city of London, the financial center, that almost to New York. And you lose Airbus, just kill Airbus. Okay. Those are kind of the two major points. And then you have to comply with all of the phytosanitary regulations of NAFTA. And the UK is not ready for that. It's actually it's not even physically, the industrial plant isn't even ready for that. And then you get to become similar to Mexico and Canada, you get to become a sub-state of the United States economically. You put inputs into it and we send stuff back out to you. And that's a whole lot of pride that I don't know that Britain's ready to swallow yet.
I can't see us going, our government will, but the people won't, but we don't get listened to anyway. Our government are just serving the top 1%, really.
Well,
yeah, that's a lot of pride to swallow.
Yeah.
But that's the only other deal.
Is one of Britain. Well, he's married to one of Britain's richest women, and he comes out and he's like, "Oh, I'm all for the people, and I know you, and all this." Like, no, you fucking don't. Excuse my French, but yeah.
No, I've yet to meet a politician who was for any. I've yet to meet a politician who was anybody but themselves.
Well, he went on a publicity drive just before, I think, just after he wasn't even elected. This is why we don't like him. But he was trying to be one of the people, and he didn't even know how to fill up a car. He borrowed somebody's Nissan Micra or a Ford Kia or something to look more, more like one of the people. And he went into pay with a card, and he didn't even know how to use the chip and pin number. You just it. And he was there, like the woman was like moving it, and he was. Yeah, you should Google it. It's hilarious.
Hey,
and you think,
but that happened in the U.S.
Hey,
when George Bush went to a supermarket where they had, the automated checkout with the rollers, and he was just amazed at, wow, same kind of thing.
But to not even know how to use your card, to like bleep it. I presume you've got the contactless thing.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't assume that all countries do have these things. It's not ignorance. It's
not all do.
No, but I would assume the Americans do, but you don't want to assume that you do, if that makes sense. But yeah, does he never use a card?
Probably not. He probably has somebody do all of that stuff for him.
But surely he must need to nip into somewhere and buy a sandwich occasionally. Do you know what I mean? But anyway, sorry, I've digressed.
But so yeah, I mean, obviously we've gone far afield, but these people, they're not. That's an interesting picture though, because a lot of people will say, oh, this and that, and they come up with all these grand conspiracy theories. No, they're just rich children.
Mm-hmm.
And they've never had to live the life of the normal people. And so they just don't, when they're off there making this policy, it's ignorance, not malice. They just don't understand. And that's why I love Hanlon's razor. I love it. Almost more than Occam's razor, which is more well known. The simplest explanation is the most likely correct. All else being equal, the simplest explanation is the most likely to be the correct one. But never attribute to malice what can be attributed to ignorance, all things being equal. This is a perfect example of that. These people are beyond ignorant of how the average person lives, and yet they try to tell you how to live their lives. Well, one of the fascinating things about these cultural turning points is that goes away, because all of a sudden the real world interjects with some problem that cannot just be hand waved or dealt with, at a political level. It's going to require a mobilization of the people to solve the problem. And the people are what ends up happening is the people very clearly recognize this person has no clue what they're doing. We need somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And they find a person who can do that thing. The reason we didn't replace FDR during World War II is because FDR very quickly replaced a bunch of generals. There's a whole history of what happened, but the guy at the top was actually smart enough to realize that his generals were crap, replaced a whole class of them, basically, got a whole bunch of new ones, and those ones knew what they were doing and were actually able to fight the war. But that kind of thing is going to happen in a lot of different places. But we haven't reached that crisis point yet. And everyone thinks that the Russia war is going to be it. I don't think it is. Whether or not Russia collapses in Ukraine is irrelevant at this point. Just looking at the equipment losses in Ukraine already, their military has been gutted. Like, it would take them, I think somebody did the math, it would take them 2 decades to rebuild what they've lost. Well, they don't have that kind of time demographically. By the 20 years from now, they won't have the young bodies that are required to fight a war, particularly a modern industrial war.
They have a lot of women.
Oh, they have an abundance of women over there. But women don't fight wars by themselves. They get men to do it.
Well, they can send them to factories, like in China.
Yeah, okay, but factories by themselves don't win wars if there's nobody to pull the trigger on the other side.
That's true.
So, like, there's a part of me that goes, yes, the Russia thing. It's like, to some extent, the Western world got what it needed out of Ukraine, and that is we cut the Russian military in half.
That's true, but we've also depleted a lot of our munition stocks and showed some of our vulnerabilities.
Sure.
I don't know that our military is as strong or perceived to be as strong as it was prior to that conflict.
Okay.
Now, I'm not saying it's a bigger or smaller factor. I'm just saying both sides have kind of been diminished in capabilities.
They were talking about conscription in the UK a few weeks ago.
Well, that's I happen to know that
their shit.
Okay, so the reason for that has nothing to do with war. It has to do with their recruiting practices. I follow aviation, so I've been following the RAF. The RAF is actually the RAF's chief recruiter was publicly, and she actually put out this plan that says we will only recruit women and people of color.
Yeah, they loved it when I was going to join the RAF. I didn't. I didn't in the end.
Yeah.
From 16, my life was mapped out until I was 22.
Oh, okay.
I was going to go to university, do aeronautical engineering, and go straight in as an officer. But they were loving it that I was wanting to join and do engineering.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a little more recent than that, but she was like, "Oh yeah, no, because I think she's still working there. Yeah, we're only going to recruit women and people of color." And then the women and people of color don't show up at the recruiting offices, and now they have a massive staffing crisis.
The UK Armed Services is really hurting for people. It's shrunk a lot.
Yeah.
Yes, the United States has a similar problem, not to the same degree.
It's also, though, I mean, the posts I was seeing, the only social media I'm on is Instagram, so that was it. But the comments I was seeing under, like, they were talking about conscription, it was all Gen Z. And I mean, the excuses they were coming out with. And I was actually, I suppose, being a Gen X, you have a slightly different attitude. And I was actually quite shocked and ashamed. You know, I mean, people were like, "Will I be able to bring? You know, I need to stay at home with my emotional support dog and just all these kind of things." You know, these. I'll find the post and send it to you, Elena. And I'm like, I was actually quite well. I wasn't shocked by the comments, but I was thinking how times have changed and how attitudes have changed. You know, just a little over 100 years ago, there was lads lying about their ages to fight for their countries. And now they're lying their asses off to not go fight for their country. And I did find that, you know.
I suppose it's a good thing we're not going to fight a major war this go around, because there is no, we're not. So, I mean, okay, so who are the two major challengers to the Western powers? Russia and China. Okay, well, we just got done saying how Russia's demographics are only, you know, they're just better than China's demographics, right? Okay, here's a thing that most people don't understand. You know, everyone says, "Oh, don't fight a war on two fronts." So how was the United States able to fight World War II and win? Because it was two very different wars. A European war is a land war. It's a war of artillery. It's a war of attrition. So you need lots of bodies, lots of land-based guns, lots of tanks. Any war in Asia is a naval war. So you need ships, you still need lots of bodies, but you actually need fewer.
The Marines.
Yeah, you need yes. But you need airplanes, you need bombs, you need missiles. So you can actually, so the military supply chain can actually supply both, because the majority of the sea-based weapons go west, and the majority of the land-based weapons go east to Europe. So the United States right now, most people don't realize this. If I was to take two of our carrier battle groups, called carrier strike groups now, but it's a collection of ships built around a U.S. aircraft carrier. Those two aircraft carriers carry more combat power and firepower than all of the carrier fleets of the rest of the world combined, including our NATO allies. We have 11 of those.
And the UK has two, but
they don't have the support
one
ships.
are working right now.
Well, it's the bigger problem is that they don't have the support ships. So the destroyers that guard the carrier, they spent so much money on the carriers that they didn't have enough money to build the support ships. So those carriers now routinely practice integrating with U.S. carrier strike groups and our ships, because they rely on U.S. destroyers for protection. Even in places like right now, the Red Sea, the Gulf, where that stuff's
France
going on.
has one, and Russia, they kind of have one, but it doesn't go anywhere.
Well, because it lights on fire every time it leaves port.
Yeah.
The Chinese have two, but one of those is what we call a jump carrier, and jump carriers have very hard limits on the amount of ordnance an airplane can carry. because they have to be able to take off in a short distance. They can't carry the weight. They're building, so they did build a standard, what we call catobar, catapult assisted takeoff, but and then something arrested landing. The problem they're having with that ship, though, is that there's a giant crack running left to right across the bow of the ship. A giant crack, and so people keep talking about the Chinese have this, the Chinese have that. Okay, I'm going to use something that isn't quite that bad. The Chinese nuclear missile submarines are based on 1970s Russian designs. We can hear their nuclear submarines putting to sea from the west coast of the United States if the sea conditions, thermoclines and stuff like that are right. Their ships are that noisy. We don't we know where they all are. And one of the things that I think people don't realize is we spend so much money on our military, and we complain about the price, but our stuff actually works. What we found out about Russian military, electronics, Russian electronic warfare hardware, it's junk. It doesn't work. The United States got a copy of it and they had worked around all of it in a month. Our stuff works. Yes, we paid through the nose for it, but our systems were not as corrupt as the Chinese system. They weren't as corrupt as the Russian system. And we are seeing the benefits. So there's a question of how much would we have to fight? And the answer is, I think in both cases, they would be, yes, the United States military is not what it used to be. I'm not sure it would matter as much as we think it would. We would win the next war. It's the war after that when we really get complacent because, hey, look, we won 2 world wars back to back. That would be the one that concerns me. Right now,
I don't have to find out the answer to this.
Well, personally, I don't think we're going to make it that far. I think that the United States is going to have a massive. I think the crisis is going to be an energy crisis, and I can point to a whole bunch of things that are causing that. And I've talked, even in the red pill community, there's a lot of dudes there who work, pretty blue collar jobs, and they'll tell you all about it. But I don't think a war is going to be the problem. I think it's going to be. This is my personal opinion, but I think it's going to be a massive energy crisis. That is our sort of social problem for this cycle.
I agree. I spent most of my career doing pipeline stuff.
Oh, okay.
Do you know about 30 to 35% of the U.S. crude oil supply travels through Minnesota?
Yes, I actually did know that.
It's all Canadian.
Yes.
Pipelines. Yeah, I'm very familiar with that.
Saskatchewan, Alberta, Manitoba.
Yeah,
Canadian,
it all comes down through the U.S. down to Chicago, big refining there.
Yeah. Well, it's worse than that even. So they keep saying that they want to electrify the grid with EVs, and that's going to solve the climate crisis. A, whatever. B, if you actually try that, our grid melts down. Literally, the actual electrical lines melt. We just don't have enough transmission capacity. Okay. But that also means that we don't have enough generation capacity. You do the math, and we need to build at least we need to start building at least 100 nuclear reactors now if we're going to keep up with the expansion of demand.
Guys, check. This is the post that Eamma sent.
Oh, no. Yep. Okay. There it is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that was mid-January, well, end of January. So yeah, a few weeks ago, but it's
Yeah, interesting.
I would literally rather die. Yeah, the comments are yeah.
They pretty much give the feeling it's a hard no, pretty much. I'm not
Yeah.
laughing at that. I'm laughing at the attitudes of people.
So here's what I will say on that. Going back to that, most people don't because we don't talk about it. When World War II broke out in 1939, the United States had 2 divisions in the Army, and one of those was like a National Guard type. They didn't call it that at that point, but it was not in a state of readiness, shall we say. We had 2. And so, the Gen Zers, they actually, their generation, they you call them the silent generation right now, but the Gen Zs are the silent generation of today. Their generation actually made up a lot of the sort of the younger echelons of the military in World War II. So something will happen. And one of the things you have to understand about both millennials and Gen Z is they're very group oriented. And if they see the group under threat, they will respond. And this is something that Gen X particularly kind of goes, like, the Gen X is very, very hyper individualistic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so it's right now, there is no major group threat. Not really. Like, we can kind of look at they say, oh, what, and the politicians would love there to be a group threat to try and mobilize the younger generations, but it's not working. And they don't understand why, and it has to do with the fact that it's not a threat to that generation. It's a threat to people in power, but it's not a threat to the Gen Zers are like, why do I care about this? It's over there. It's a problem over there. So, but an energy crisis is an immediate threat to Gen Z. I mean, we're always talking about how they're always on their phones, and they can't, they need their emotional support dogs, and if the power goes out for a couple hours, right? Okay, so the threat to Gen Z is an energy crisis, and
it's even a bigger threat to Gen Alpha, because they won't. I don't even get me started on Gen Alpha.
Well, so Gen Alpha hasn't. So
I know they're still young. But
no, they don't actually exist yet. So what you need to understand about generations is that there's what we call the marketing generations, and those are every 7 to 10 years. But if you look at
apparently, because I'm really in the whole generation thing is something that really interests me, and I was doing I've been doing a lot of reading and watching about Gen Alpha, but they so I didn't realize there's different categories for the generations. But one of the articles I was reading is actually saying that Generation Alpha is 2010 to today.
Yeah. Okay.
The generations are actually getting smaller because of technology.
No, that is all.
Sorry, is the word I was looking for.
That is all marketers. So there are marketing demographics, and then there are actual demographics.
Okay.
So there's a book by a guy named Neil Howe. He is an actual demographer. That's what he trained in. That's what he studied since school. Okay. The generations are actually getting longer.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this one did say it was because of the technological advances.
Right. So the marketers need to be able to bucket, and they need to be able to bucket in ever finer groups. And so that's why the generations are getting shorter. Okay. So Neil Howe he wrote a book called The Fourth Turning is Here. And so if you hear me talking about this kind of cultural crisis and how it's been 90 years, that actually all comes straight from him. And when I talk about the War of the Roses, he wrote a book, and it's a long, hard read called Generations, with another guy named William Strauss, who unfortunately died a few years later. I mean, the book is like over 1,000 pages long, but it goes all the way back to the War of the Roses. And it's not just the demographics, it's the history of what was happening, why it was happening, et cetera, for each of these turnings. So he wrote a book called The Fourth Turning is Here. It's just about what's going on right now. But he actually points out, and he actually very specifically addresses this, the generations are getting smaller. No, and he says, no, the marketers just need smaller generations for their own purposes.
Yeah, that does make sense.
So the generations are actually getting longer. The millennial generation is 22 years long, and Gen Z will be 24 years long when they're done being born. So that's what I'm going to say. Gen Alpha hasn't started yet. Gen Alpha would be what he would call the prophet generation. Those would be what you call boomers in your lexicon. And they're not being born yet. We're getting there, but we're not there yet. So the way he cuts it is, so the boomers started being born in 1943, 1944. They do not have any memory of the crisis period. And that's how you kind of mark it. So he doesn't consider COVID a crisis. And I actually agree with him on that. He wrote the book after COVID. This is a brand new book. It just came out last year. And he does not consider COVID to be the crisis point.
A lot of marketers would love it to be a crisis point.
Oh, yes, we know.
So they can break it. Yeah.
But anyway, there's a lot of stuff going on there. And if you actually think about it, the generation should be lengthening because human lifespan is lengthening.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I can talk this demographic stuff for literal hours. I have been studying it since I was 14. My dad got me started in it, and it has been in some ways a curse because you get to see the broad strokes of what's coming long before it does. And I'm sure Steve can be over there like, yes, I know exactly. I can see the flashbacks in his eyes over there.
The longer you live and the more you study, the more you know. And then other people don't know the same thing. Yeah, it's wisdom that comes with age. It makes life interesting, but it makes it tough to talk to people sometimes too.
And then you create a conspiracy theory.
Well, exactly.
Because you know what nobody knows, right?
Well, see, I don't look at any of this as a conspiracy theory. I can look back in history and I can say, oh, yeah, back to the War of the Roses, we can see this cycle. And it looks different every time. But, this general framework is kind of followed. And, and so I can look back and I can say, no, okay, we can look through history. We can see, yeah, we're about due. And, when I was, 14, it was very theoretical. Now that we're closer to it, it's gotten a little more, okay, what are we going to do with this?
It will be interesting to see, because I always have an interest in social experiments as well. And I mean, like the Milgram experiment is a very good one to bring up. And I don't know if you know, but the director Eli Roth recreated it. Well, he redid it in, I think it was 2010, I want to say.
Yes, I heard about this.
Just to see if anything had changed with human behavior. And no, it hasn't. He pretty much got the same results. So it would be interesting to see if somebody did it again in 20 years' time or something, especially with the way the new generations are coming out and the way they think and behave. Be interesting to see if I don't think it would have changed either. But
human behavior changes very, very slowly.
Yeah.
Our systems, our biological programming does not react at the speed that our technology does. And so it's interesting though, because again, going back to the 1920s and 30s, you might remember this from your history textbooks. Do you remember the rise of yellow journalism?
Yes, I studied this back in college, so I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, there was a lot of that.
Right. And then again, it all kind of disappeared. It feels like it disappeared overnight, but that's not really true.
What is yellow journalism?
Oh, so yellow, that might be an American term. Yellow journalism was this phenomenon where journalists would write stories in the local newspaper. This goes back to the era of the telegraph. And they would write stories in their local newspaper, and then the story would get sent out on the wire, the telegraph wire, and then the story would be picked up in a different city, and the people in that different city who had no idea that this journalism was complete bunk because they weren't living in the city, and they would freak out about it.
Okay.
But the local people were like, this person's just being silly, or it's a joke, or whatever.
It was a lot of sensationalist. And scandals and just whatever got people emotionally riled up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Without a lot of factual basis.
Right.
Yeah.
Does that sound similar to what's going on today?
Yeah.
So what the problem was is you had a lot of people who had grown up with technology working a certain way. And then technology shifts quickly. That's the telegraph. All of a sudden, information can be transmitted across the country in real time. Well, okay, almost real time because they're using tapping out Morse code. But right, within the space of a few minutes, information can move from one side. People's minds just had not adapted to that. What actually the reason the shift happened was because the generations, as they started dying out, the bulk of the population had grown up with that technology and they understood the implications of it, and they stopped believing the sensationalism. And so the sensational stories don't sell as well. They don't, it stops working on a certain generation that grew up with it, that's used to it. And you're seeing that kind of thing happen with Gen Z, and they're moving back to flip phones that don't have apps. Texting requires hitting a 9 key.
Let's talk about another cycle.
Okay.
The teens and 20s were a lot of sexual liberation.
Yes.
Flappers. And then, we have the Depression, and, the 30s and 40s and even 50s. Things were pretty conservative.
Yes.
And then you moved into the 60s, and we had what are they called? Free love movement. And it's kind of gotten, look where we're at today.
Right.
Is it going to get worse, or are we going to see a reversion to more restrictive sexual expression?
I was just about to say, a lot of that love is behind a paywall, isn't it, nowadays? So it's not so much free, is it?
Well, it's not free, no.
No.
Are we going to see a demographic change in sexual attitudes?
Historically, the answer to that would be yes. Believe it or not, that cycle of liberal and then conservative sexual mores has also been around since the War of the Roses. Like that, because you had the Victorian era, but we don't talk about as much about the era that was happening before that, where the sexual mores did loosen up. Now, we have obviously loosened up over time. We have trended a certain way, but there is a cycle that has occurred inside that trend. Here's the thing. If we have a grid, let's say we have I don't think the United States is going to have a full grid collapse. I think we will have a series of regional grid collapses. And then we kind of fix it. And then, and then we realize we need to actually start doing other things. But when the power goes out for a day, it's fun. You get, you can't work, it's like a snow day. Okay. When the power goes out for a week, now what do? Your phone is discharged. Your food's
social media.
Yeah, you can't get on social media anymore. You can't check your Instagram DMs, and more importantly, as a woman, you can't reach out and find a guy to come take care of you. Okay. 2 weeks in, you have burned through all your food. You're desperate. I think that as we go, let's say an energy crisis is almost uniquely positioned to permanently scar women.
There's one other thing. What if, the finances of the U.S. can't continue as they are forever, and our welfare state cannot continue as it is forever? At some point, probably will be a crisis, and some of these transfer payments, which tend to support women with SNAP benefits and all these things, either they'll be reduced or stop, or if we end up with an inflation situation, it's not going to be enough money to buy what you need. That's a similar crisis to the power going out. Not as abrupt, though.
It's not. And so one of the other things I do a lot of things because, as Elena will tell you, I don't do much recreation. One of the things I do is I trade. Specifically, I trade options. And one of the cool things that trading options has taught me about is how to read underlying volatility of markets. That's kind of the whole purpose of trading options. And what I can tell you is we are currently right now, the market, well, not today because the market's closed, but we are setting up a super, what we call a super cyclical volatility event. So this is being 1929. Okay. I personally have never assumed that Social Security will exist for me when I retire. The bargain I think that we will strike, because we can make the math work on it, is the boomers get their full thing because the boomers are already starting to die. It's just not going to be a problem for much longer. Gen X gets kind of half of what they're promised, and the millennials and everyone after gets nothing. I have a feeling that we're going to strike a bargain like that somewhere. But the idea that the transfer system can survive the crash that's coming is ridiculous. It's not going to happen. If we get a crash, I suspect probably either very late this year or next year. The Federal Reserve will step in. They'll probably print about $30 trillion. They will create a massive inflation cycle doing it. And then you kind of end up in the situation where you're talking about, so you're saying, oh, well, what if we get one or the other? I'm saying we can have both inside of a decade.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
It's funny, actually, because I've been seeing on social media, and it's been from conspiracy accounts saying, watch out, because Bill Gates has just sold loads of shares in things. And,
okay.
Bezos and all this, and they're like, if he's getting rid of shares, then something's going on.
You want to
segue nicely to that.
This is hilarious. We started out debunking. Plutarch started out debunking conspiracies, and now he's trying to sell us on this biggest conspiracy of all.
Okay. Let me respond. Let me respond. Do you want to know what the trading community does when they hear about some rich person selling shares?
No.
We roll our eyes.
Right. Okay. I know they are trading all the time. That's how they're so rich. But
it doesn't,
and through whatever they've got there with as well, their business or.
So, hey, did you hear there was a whale that just sold a whole bunch of Bitcoin?
I did hear that. Do you want to know what Bitcoin did after that?
Consolidated, went up a little bit.
It went higher. Right, exactly.
Oh, have you seen that video going around? It's a very young, well, I'm going to say very young. I mean, they're, I would say early 20s possibly. And somebody on the street has approached them and said $100 cash or one Bitcoin. And he's going, I'll have the $100 cash, and the girl is looking at him, and he's like, no, give me the cash. And you're like, in the comments, it said
$68,000 for.
Oh well, when I saw this, it was worth 44. So.
That's 68 right now. However, the problem with Bitcoin is that it's not a store of value. A store of value needs to be relatively stable. Now, and we can talk about inflation, but inflation is a long-term problem. It takes years. Bitcoin going from 44 to 68 in a month is not stability. Mm-hmm. It might be beneficial for those who hold it, but that kind of volatility should scare the crap out of you. Yeah, and I say that as a guy who's
for a while, and I mean, it was wasn't it?
So in trading, we talk about something called a blow off top. So what you usually see before a major crash is this really stupid run higher fast. Okay. So a fast run higher, and on a chart, it looks like a, just like a really like a needle or a mountain. And it's really rocket ship. Yeah. It looks like a rocket ship. And what as a trader, the whole thing you're trying to do is you're trying to say, okay, I know this thing's going to go a lot higher, but it's time for me to start shorting the market. Like that's what we're going to be doing. Here's the thing:
we're in that period right now.
No, we're not.
2 to 4 weeks, I think. Maybe 6 weeks for crypto.
Yeah.
And
so crypto and iffy. So right now I'm watching Bitcoin, gold, and the dollar. Okay. Those are the three things I'm watching right now. So one of the things that I track a lot is something called dealer positioning. So the dealers are always trading against you, always. And the dealers have been able to thus far keep a lid on the market. Now, the reason they were able to do it is because the dollar index had not moved a lot, but the dollar index started falling. That means the value of the dollar is going down relative to other currencies like the euro, the pound, and a few others. And as that happens, the number of dollars required to buy a stock, or the number of pounds, let's say, required to buy a U.S. stock goes down. So U.S. stocks become cheaper relative to, British stocks in the FTSE. As that happens, you will see money flood into the U.S. stock market. Well, the dollar just started breaking down like 2 days ago. Now, that move was foretold by the move in Bitcoin, by the move in gold that happened last week. Steve is over there nodding because I'm sure Steve has gold somewhere in his.
Yeah, it's a tiny bit.
Okay, but so when you're trading, I'm not just looking at equities. In fact, equities are the least interesting market because they're the smallest market out of all of them. Commodities are bigger, currencies are bigger, bonds are bigger, and so. As I watch all this stuff happening and I'm watching the dollar break down, I'm going, everyone right now is buying puts. I can tell you that right now. The market is it's like 95% short in options. Okay. Everyone knows that a recession is coming. And so they're getting ready for a recession. But by doing so, they are forcing the dealers to. So when I buy a put from a dealer, they short shares. Let's say I buy a put on NVIDIA, they short shares. As it goes down, they short more shares. As it goes up, they buy those shares back. So if the entire market is short, the only action that dealers are ever going to take is to buy.
At a reduced price.
No.
Yeah,
no. But the dealers are what we call price insensitive.
Okay.
They don't care about what the price is. It doesn't matter to them because that's not how what they're doing. They're making money on. They sold you that put option. You paid, and so they can handle the price going up, buying back at a higher price because they've really cool computer models that do this and all. So anyway, right now everyone knows a recession is coming, and I think we can all agree that a recession is coming. It's cyclically, we're about due anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Right. Yeah. That is correct. Britain is officially in one. So is Germany. So we can all agree that recession's coming. And so what did everyone do? They go out, they sell their shares, they get short. And this is why you see these blow-off tops that occur before recessions. Everyone knows what to do, and they all go do it at the same time. And so there's no one left to sell. And when there's no one left to sell, all that can happen is buying. So right now, the dealers have been kind of able to keep control of the market. That's why you see this. It looks very controlled upward action. When you start seeing like 3 or 4 days where the S&P is climbing like 100, 200 points a day, that's when the blow-off starts for equities. I would say gold probably already started. Bitcoin been going for a while now.
How many more weeks do we have left of this?
In equities, this could take 3 months because there are so many other actors. Bitcoin is kind of an interesting market because I'm going to use the word pure because their players are just trading. There's not a whole lot of other activity. There's a whole bunch of different stuff that goes on with stocks like corporate buybacks or but then the corporate employees, they sell their vested, right? There's all in the stock market, there's all this noise. Bitcoin is kind of more pure, so it can go faster. But just because you see Bitcoin crashing doesn't mean that the stock market's done. The stock market is also a much bigger market. The stock market is $23 trillion. Bitcoin is $1 trillion right now, roughly.
I thought it was up to 2.5.
Okay, but
yeah, it's still relatively small.
So the amount of money it takes to move Bitcoin 1 percentage point is far smaller than it takes to move the S&P 1 percentage point. So it just takes a lot more money to move the stock market. That's not to say it won't happen, because as Britain, as Germany, as the rest of the Eurozone goes in recession, what are they going to want to do? They're going to want to move their assets out of, they're going to want to get out of those assets, and they're going to want to go to the safe haven, which is the United States. So you could see a massive bid just appear out of nowhere. We've seen this before, 2000. It even happened in 2008, although other factors cut it short. You could see it starting to happen. But, and I don't know if it'll get cut short this time or not. I can't tell you any of that. And please, for the love of God, don't trade anything that I'm talking about here. This is not financial advice. I am just one dude who stares at charts and math, autistically.
So I think you and I are in agreement. We're in for some interesting weeks to a few months.
Yeah.
Highly volatile.
Yes.
Highly profitable if you're on the right side of it.
Yes.
But when it's time, or before it's time, you better get the hell out.
Well, see, that's part of the reason I love options. Is options allow me to rent, and so I pay my dues. And the way I trade, I will buy an option and then I mentally write it off. Money's gone. It could win, it could lose, it's gone. And it's part of the reason I like is because of this volatility. Okay, well, if that trade doesn't work out, I didn't blow my account by going full port on options. I just, I put a percent maybe of my portfolio in a trade at 1%, and I can do this many times. Many times. And yes, volatility is there's an old guy, an old market operator from like the 80s. He said, you will never make any more money than in the run of the bubble. Shorting bubbles is hard because you don't know where the top is. But that run higher, you will never make any more money than you do in that run higher. And yes, I am positioned for a run higher right now. I'm not going to say how I did because I don't want people going out there doing what I did. And I watch at least once a week somebody in one of the trading groups that I'm in, that I talk with, they go out, they blow their entire portfolio on a call that somebody made that they believe in, not understanding that other person might have put 1% of their portfolio into a trade, and they lose everything and they get angry. I will not do that to people. When I do win a trade, I do not post my trades at all in that group until after I've won. Yeah, you can find out how I did afterwards, but I'm, I can't lead people to the slaughter like that personally. I can't do it. So, but yes, Steve, you and I are in broad agreement. It will be a few weeks to a few months. The one thing I would say is beware of election years. There are people say, oh, it's the Fed that's keeping the market propped up. No, but the way banks operate, there are things that they can do, and the banks are the dealers. And so they can keep the game going for a while. Mm-hmm. I can't tell you how long, and there is a point where they lose control. So,
yeah. Man, we've had a very interesting discussion and been all over the map.
It has been, yes.
Right. Well, see, the conspiracy theory would say the banks want the blow off top. They actually really don't. They really don't want it because they're unhealthy and they presage the end of a cycle, and it's not good for banks. But there comes a point where they lose control. And I can't tell you exactly where that is because that number changes every day. It's all based on dealer positioning, and dealer positioning is changing with every trade that's made. And there's
and remember, darling, remember that movie that we watched? It's called Margin Call.
Fantastic movie.
Yes.
If you haven't seen it, go watch it.
Watch it, because there was one guy who was saying to a younger man that people want a fancy lifestyle and then they rely on the banks to provide it for them. but people are not capable of paying off their debts. I mean, he used different language, I'm just paraphrasing it.
In my opinion, it's the best line of the whole movie. He's saying they want us to keep our hand on the scale so that they don't have to worry about, so that they can live like kings.
Yeah.
And then they get angry at us when it blows up. Well,
they can't afford it. They can't afford it. They want it, right. And it looks possible because banks,
Yeah. Well, I don't have to be able to afford it. All I have to do is be able to afford the payments on it.
Right.
That's exactly what he's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And because, okay, who actually prints 80% of the money in the United States?
The bank.
Exactly. Not the Fed. The commercial banks print most of the money in the United States through loans. Most people don't know that, but that's what he's talking about. They want the banks to print all this cheap money so that they can go out and buy expensive things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, let me explain how the banks do this. You deposited $100 in the bank. Mm-hmm. Now the bank with fractional reserve can take that $100, and if they have a 5% margin that they have to maintain in assets, that $100 they can now go loan $2,000 out. When they loan that $2,000, it comes from nowhere. It's just created, and on the balance, and then there's a double accounting. Yep. So it just comes from nowhere, and you enable that by depositing the $100. And people don't understand this is where a lot of our money comes from.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Just created.
Well, and here's the really incestuous part of it. What do they do with that $2,000? You deposit it back in a bank.
A different bank or the same bank. They can do it over again.
And do it over again. And that's inflation. So I'm not going to say that inflation isn't real. It's the point that I want to make to people is that the Fed is not the primary driver. You are. Because you're out buying expensive things that you can't afford on credit.
Yep.
That's what creates inflation. Because that's money printing in its purest form. So the Fed can kind of do the same thing, but they can only do it in the financial economy. But with the big banks, and I've actually read the Federal Reserve Act. Like, the Fed can only transact with a limited list of banks, and yes, they create reserves, but the bank has to give them something in exchange. And they're playing games with balance sheet capacity is all they're doing, and that gives them some ability to impact, but it's primarily kept inside the financial economy. It leaks out very slowly into the regular economy, primarily, ironically, through traders. Because traders, they make their income out of trading the markets. So they have to pull money out to go buy things. So traders are the primary of Fed printing. They're the primary way the money gets out. It's kind of dumb, but that's just how the system works right now. So anyway, I can talk about this topic for hours. You want to talk flying? You want to talk, like conspiracy theories? You want to talk finance? You want to talk any of that? I can go for hours. But,
well, you know what? You and I seem to be able to keep up with each other as we range on these topics. It's fun. I enjoy it.
Fun. It is
fun.
But I don't know. It's been 2 hours, and have the rest of their day to get to.
Yeah, it's great to have you guys. Thank you, Plutarch, for diving in deeper into these topics. It's always a pleasure to have you here. And thank you, Steve, for joining us today. Always a pleasure to talk to you. And Eamma, as always.
It was a great conversation today, Steve. I have a feeling that we could chat for hours offline as well.
I bet we could.
And it's nice to have people to talk with people who can keep up with you. I love it.
Yeah, that's fun.
And Eamma, you brought some fascinating points today. Yeah. Keep it up. I love watching people. They start connecting with the world around them and realizing that yes, the truth is not what you've been told, but that doesn't make it this grand conspiracy to fuck you. Ignorance, people. It's all ignorance. It's all stupidity.
Yeah.
I always feel a bit stunted sometimes because I mean, being in a cult for 11 years, you shelter yourself away from the world, and also they discourage you from critical thinking. So I'm relearning how to critical think, and it's yeah. So yeah,
Well,
thank
I'm
you
glad.
for
I'm
helping
glad.
me as well as me bringing stuff to you.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
fun.
that's one of my specialist subjects.
We all have one, don't we?
Yes, that cult's a topic I could go on for hours, but yeah.
Oh my goodness!
It all relates to psychology,
yes.
and even red pill, and even conspiracies, because it's what you choose to believe.
Yes.
And what other people
But do you
propagandize
choose?
you. And, it's not a simple thing. But none of this is simple.
Absolutely.
Yeah, maybe we can talk about cult next week.
Oh boy, I'm sleeping in for that one.
You're
I'm
sleeping in
sleeping
for that. Steve, would you join us next week for cult?
Yeah, I can. I don't know much about cults.
I've never actually spoken
from the outside.
I've never actually spoken publicly about it. It's taken I've been out literally I think it's 8 years this week, but it took quite a while to say to people close to me, in my real life, having the courage to say I was in a cult. And I had to step away from that world for a while, because as much as you're healing from all of that, by hitting the internet and reading and being on forums and all that, you are kind of keeping your brain in that place, in that mindset, when you're trying to actually free yourself. And it's helpful in some ways, but in other ways not.
Were you embarrassed to admit you were in a cult?
Of course. Yeah, you have.
Maybe that's what stops you. But saying it is actually part of the healing process. And then finding out, people say, "Oh, really?"
I always back it up with, I was a Jehovah's Witness, please feel free to judge me. It's that's my jokey way of sort of I suppose saying it's all right if you judge me for that.
And if you speak up, it can help also other people who might be in a similar situation. This is why we want it here.
And you're not required to if you're uncomfortable.
No, I'm fine. It's literally the last, I suppose, couple months I've discovered a podcast on YouTube, and I'm absolutely binging her stuff, and it's really helping. And hearing stories from other people, from other cults, even though they're all different, we all go through the same experiences, or how they operate and how they control you and all of that. It's
very similar, isn't it?
Yeah. And as a teenager, I was always fascinated by cults, but I went for more the ones that were one bloke at the top, and everyone adoring him, but and him abusing his power. Never occurred to me, like the Mormons and the Jehovah's Witnesses and things like that, bigger groups that are disguised as churches.
The group cult without they're not cults of personality. They're group cults. So a cult of personality is the
there is one leader.
Yes. Sorry.
Anyway, we don't have to get started on this.
We can leave it for next week, guys, so that we have something to talk about next week too.
But yeah,
perfect. Yeah, well, great to see everyone. Thank you guys who showed up for our live stream today. I saw Glenn here, Glenn Lawrence. He's doing Dragon Ship show now with Api Thor. Guys, if you'd like to jump into that show and support Api Thor, that would be awesome. And then we had Nuke here. I highly recommend you to subscribe to Nuke's and Glenn's YouTube channel. Eventually, maybe Steve will create a YouTube channel or something that we can refer you guys to him, but he will be here with us next.
I like just participating.
Oh, cool. Okay.
It's lovely to meet you, Steve.
Nice meeting you, Eamma.
Yeah. You are on Twitter, right, Steve?
Well, I haven't been on Twitter for a long time.
You haven't been on Twitter? Okay. I was just wondering where people could find you if they want to talk to you or something. Cool. Well, okay, let's wrap it up, guys. Remember to please like, share, and subscribe. Your help and support are highly appreciated. Leave your comments. Tell us what you think about today's topics, and we'll see you all next week. Okay, take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye.